All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Psych Revolution. This is we're going to say tentatively episode number 5. We lost track of time a little bit. Welcome to our little board meeting here. I have Chris Ruckus here and C Fish over here. And today we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're just going to have a Q&A and talking about mental health. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Matt to do some introductions.
All right, so we've got Chris Ruckus of Pittsburgh ska core band Dissidente, and honestly, this is fucking dope because the entire outside of Psych Revolution is a revolution in mental health, breaking out of the system for some underground care, and so people from that community we're trying to reach being involved with us has always been the fucking goal, so here we are.
Cool. Glad to be here.
We're so happy to have you. We're so happy to have you. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Chris? Let us know what you're about and why you're here.
My name's Chris Ruckus. I'm from the band Dissidente. I feel like this part's already been going over.
This is how it goes.
My mental health journey started very young. I was raised in a Mormon household, and so just had no fucking shot at living a normal life. Heads up, just it might get a little bit into childhood trauma here, so if anyone you want to tune your ears, please go ahead. But yeah, I mean the Mormon church was. What's that, buddy?
Real quick for everyone. So it sounds like trigger warnings for childhood trauma, and well, because it's the Mormons, religious abuse trigger warning.
Yeah. So my earliest memories of not being well, all pretty much stem from the church. Like the Mormon church is so fucked when it comes to things like that. I remember being, 12 years old and in a room alone with a grown man and him asking about my masturbation habits and shit like that. And just, there's no fucking that in and of itself is, I think, pretty fairly abusive. And the fact that this church, that's just normal for them is just how it goes. Yeah, not great.
That sounds really intense to have to go through at that age, especially when we are all already really awkward at that age. So being put into an awkward situation like that sounds like that was really difficult to go through. I'm sorry that you had to go through that. Would you say that the experiences you had growing up kind of tailored either your ability or your inability to express yourself and express what was going on with yourself mentally because of the kind of stifling that you experienced earlier in life?
I think that the church and the culture surrounding the church that my parents were very entrenched in just made it so you just didn't talk about something. You would talk about some very fucking bizarre things to some people that you have nothing in common with, and then we just did not talk about depression. We just pretended it did not exist, despite the fact that trigger warning, my grandmother had multiple suicide attempts and things we did not talk about substance abuse. These were just conversations that did not happen, and skills that I did not learn because of it.
Would you say that you felt like that made your journey more difficult by having that growing up, coming of age or getting a little bit older? Do you feel like that made it a lot harder for you to acclimate to, and I'm putting major quotes around this, normal life?
For sure. I think that if I'm to be honest, I think that's where most of my problems probably stem from. And I know my sister, for instance, is a drug addict, and I know for a fact that the issues that she faced would not have been such an issue were it not for just growing up in a teetotaler society.
Mm-hmm.
So we were have that. We weren't exposed to any of that, so we didn't have the skills to adapt to it later in life.
So it's sounding like you're saying like the lack of ability to express yourself and experience skillful ways to deal with things kind of, I don't want to say set you up for failure because you're pretty awesome now, but definitely made things harder.
For sure. And like a lot of it was that like I had to find my own community, so like I had nothing in common with the Mormons. I had nothing in common with like the conservatives. So like for me it was finding punk rock and finding, a second family in that, which is really where, I came into my own.
What drew you to the punk rock community? Like, why was that the community instead of, the metal community or, any of the other, musical communities, so to speak?
It's funny you mentioned metal because like my brother, who is Mormon and is conservative, was very into metal. And that was like, for me, that was like, I mean, I like it now. I like metal music a lot. I'll enjoy playing it, but I always thought that scene was kind of douchey because the person, like the major person in my life who was a major antagonist in my life was super into that. So I just didn't fall into that. For me, punk rock was something that I kind of discovered almost myself. Like I had ska records that kind of led me into the punk rock records, but punk rock was like, okay, cool, like this is mine. This feels like I discovered it for myself, and as such I can kind of have some ownership for it and felt more welcomed by it.
Do you feel like the discovery of it and you discovering it yourself was more of the reason that pulled you towards it, or were there any sort of like ideals or values of the punk rock community that drew you towards it?
For sure. I think it's more the latter. Like for me, like obviously because I like discovered it for myself, it was really it had a special meaning. But the fact that like I never heard, Metallica singing against racism, but I did hear Operation Ivy singing against it. I did hear fucking the Specials, and so for me, I didn't hear Pantera singing against homophobia, but I did hear Rancid singing against it. So like those were things that were really important to me as I was developing my own ethos.
Do you feel like the punk rock community helped you develop that coming out of the situation that you were coming from, where it was kind of like do as I say sort of thing, as opposed to, finding, punk rock and, learning about, what you are for and what you aren't?
For sure. I mean, it absolutely informed my worldview. I as a kid, like how many kids? I mean, maybe it's different today, but when I was a kid, like I wasn't woke. You know what I mean? Like I was a dickhead, just like every other conservative dickhead I grew up with.
Yeah.
It's something that we all had to kind of learn and unlearn. And punk rock definitely helped me do that.
That's what's up. That's what's up. For me, it was emo rock.
Hell yeah.
Emo rock, just because I came from a very Catholic, constricted, where like everything's your fault. You're carrying around like all this shame and this guilt all the time, and I didn't really know how to deal with all of that. And getting into emo kind of gave me a space while like alone in my room listening to it to kind of sort through those feelings and really like push through them to figure out where I stood on things and how I felt about them. So I totally understand coming from a pretty devout background. I mean, like I was baptized, I went through my first Holy Communion, I was confirmed as an adult in the Catholic Church, I was an altar girl. Like I played my flute in the choir. I was very, very, very devout Catholic. So I definitely understand where you're coming from to a certain extent. Obviously, different religions, different, rules, so to
Both
speak.
were converting to Mormonism were both Catholic. So I feel like I got that from both sides.
Oh no! Like
and I'm over here just shaking my head yes, because through my kid years and teen years, I went through a weird fucking religious journey, which there was Catholic, I was Mormon for a few years, so I'm like in a small town. The one religion in the US who I know still fucking does arranged marriages. And that's not even hyperbolic. Chris knows, I'm sure.
It's wild.
No, you're absolutely right. I actually just watched a whole documentary about all of that in the Mormon church, but that's a different episode. We won't get into that this one because all of us could probably go on for a really long time about that.
But either you see kids that are clearly fucking flailing with abuse at home, and in my case, blossoming drug addiction, and you're like, oh, they're fine. They just need a Boy Scout some more, whatever bullshit their toxic men would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They feel like that they can just slap something on it and make it okay, when in all reality, things need to be addressed and things need to be talked about. Because, Chris, like what you were talking about, those awkward situations that you were in, that's not the way that's supposed to happen. That's not the way those things are supposed to be discussed. And to be completely honest, if you are going to have that awkward conversation, it needs to happen with a parent or a guardian that you trust and you feel safe around, instead of some rando at your church who they think is the right person for you to talk to. So I definitely feel you on that. For me, it was a little bit different. It was confession. And I always thought confession was really weird because, they're like, oh, it's confidential. Okay, well, when you're in a parish that has 2 priests and you're an altar girl and they know the sound of your voice, yet you're supposed to go into the confessional and tell them the things that you feel bad about, yet they're not supposed to know who you are.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't give you that sense of security, to be able to share those very, intimate details about yourself, and those quote unquote wrongdoings that you feel like that you've done, to speak with somebody. So I think we can all agree that, at least in our cases, it might be different for others, that religion definitely stunted us in some ways in our emotional growth. So this might seem a little bit redundant, Chris, but would you say that, do you feel like you're growing up being Mormon or in that type of environment, do you think that made things more difficult for you? And if so, was there anything else that you feel like growing up or even in your adult life that's made your mental health journey difficult?
I think that the difficulties that it led were things that I didn't know at the time. So for instance, like, when I was a kid, like I didn't do any drugs. I was a good kid. I didn't drink. And it wasn't until my adult life so I had an accident where I broke my collarbone. And then a couple of years later, like I cut off a part of my finger and just had like an endless prescription of Oxycontin, hydrocodone, and Percocet. And these were things that I had no experience with, like, moderation, because I never was exposed to anything that I needed to moderate with. So it wasn't really until then that, like, I found out that, I have a family history of alcoholism and drug abuse. And these were not things that I even considered, because it wasn't a problem for my parents, because they just didn't have that around. So,
right.
What's that?
I said, right.
What'd you say? Yeah, it's just things that just sort of set me up for failure and set up some of my family for failure too. My sister is something that she really struggles with to this day.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that on a lot of different levels. I'm like embarrassed to say this now because I have worked in the cannabis community on and off for over a decade, but growing up in the environment that I grew up in, like I was definitely one that was like reefer badness, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh my God, this is so bad. This is, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then I hit about 15 and, I smoked cannabis for the first time, and it was just downhill from there. And I don't want to say that cannabis was the gateway drug for me, because I think what was more the gateway drug for me was the lack of consistency and help that I had with my mental health, as opposed to the cannabis. But yeah, I went straight from cannabis to drinking to lots and lots of other drugs for a very long period of time. And, I'm happy to say that I've been clean and sober for over 16 years, but, well, not sober, but clean. that I totally understand how growing up in a conservative and, for lack of a better term, sheltered environment can definitely set you up for some bullshit later on in life.
Oh yeah.
Some serious, yeah.
Bring up specifically weed, because like I didn't smoke weed until I was 21 years old. Like I was a super late bloomer with that, and it's not good for me. Like I am so happy that legalization is sweeping the country, just because it helps a lot of people. But for me, like I have had far more like negative, intense experiences smoking weed than like I have with mushrooms or acid. But just I don't know what it is in my brain chemistry. It just shows that we're all built differently. That's really it. My wife smokes.
Absolutely.
Like I'm glad that way that she can like calm down and relax. And for me, I just it fucks me up. I don't know what the deal is. I kind of wish I could like just chill, but it's not for me.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine. I've definitely had to take breaks at some points in times, and like one of my best friends, who like I medicated with for years with cannabis, is now working through a PhD program and refuses to smoke because as she's gotten older, has realized that it starts to make her really paranoid, and it starts to up her heart rate, which gives her anxiety, which makes her worry about her heart, which just starts like this whole snowball effect of, why the hell am I even doing this? So I feel it. And props to you for being able to figure that out for yourself and hold to it. Because I know a lot of people, especially living in California, that may have negative effects to smoking, but they smoke anyway because everybody else around them does. So props to you for being able to hold to your guns for that. So now to kind of maybe spin it into a little bit more of like a positive part of this discussion, what are some things that you feel like has made your mental health journey a little bit easier? Was it, possibly getting a diagnosis that helped explain it? Was it, becoming sober? Like what was it for you?
I didn't really see like a psych until uh, trigger warning, like suicidal ideation. Like it really wasn't until I was at my lowest that I even talked to a doctor about it. I don't know that actually, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know that was the help that I needed. I think it certainly helped, but that wasn't it. Having a word attached to it didn't do it for me. I think that a lot of the most helpful things have been the things that I've been able to do for myself. Having an outlet with music and writing is massive, and I would not be the person. I might not be standing here today if it were not for having that as an outlet. And then other things, like I got involved with Zazen meditation. Those were in Pittsburgh here. There's a Zen center called the Deep Springs Zen Center, and going there and meditating has had a massive impact in finding peace and staving off some of those negative ideations. That being said, I am medicated, so like I'm sure that the two work in tandem. But I've noticed that when I shirk writing, or if I shirk meditating, those are things that really have the biggest negative impact in my life.
I feel you on that one. I feel you on that one. For me, it was art. I do multiple different like mediums of art. I paint, I quilt, I do furniture design. I do so many different things. And for me, it's very much the same thing. I don't know if I would still be here today if it wasn't for the fact that I found a way to express and, for lack of a better way of explaining it, emotionally vomit my emotions through my mediums, to get me to a place where I can stabilize myself. I am also medicated, and can definitely tell you that without those two things in tandem, and painfully trying to learn how to play chords on my guitar, that I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that stuff. How about you, Matt? I mean, I know very much like Chris, music has very much so helped you find your way out of some dark places.
for me, the last year and a half has been fucking weird since moving here because one of my biggest grounders was skateboarding, and you can't really do that here. So I've had to find, so the art I do has expanded. I've been doing a lot more art, and then these different outlets, whether it's with an emotional health of this podcast or my political writing that I do on the blog or album reviews, because such and such album means the fucking world to me. I need to tell everyone about it. So I've had to put in new coping strategies because some of my old ones aren't available any longer.
It's interesting you brought up skateboarding because the way that I broke my collarbone was I moved back to Detroit where everything is flat as fuck to Pittsburgh. I was like, I can skate here. Nah, dude, nah. Work out as planned.
So what is it? Is it just like super hilly or whatever? Like I live in California, so you're not going to find a straight like sidewalk anywhere. Well, at least in the part of California I live in.
It's not even that it's hilly. There's almost no sidewalks out here, and the majority of your skatable surface is usually 10 kinds of fucked up. Between walls or the sidewalk's missing a chunk, and you don't know if it's the weather or some crazy guy took a jackhammer to it.
Yeah, there's a couple indoor parks that like I'll just go to. Switch and Signals are one of my favorite ones, but like, yeah, trying to skate outside here, like even the parks kind of suck, man. They can get real gravelly, and I'm not that good. I'm too fucking old, man. I'm not trying to break anything else.
Yeah, like, dude, I'm used to slapping my board down on the sidewalk and going.
Yeah, right. Which, yeah, not here.
All right, so Chris, I got 2 more questions for you, and then we're done. All right. So what are some things that you've learned about yourself or about the processes required that helped you, get the help that you needed?
Things that I've learned about myself are things that I kind of wish I knew from my folks and from my parents, from my grandparents. I would have loved if that line of communication were open. I could have known, about my grandmother's depression, or I could have known about the reason why, my grandmother converted to Mormonism was because it was teetotaler and she had a drinking problem. Things like this would have been great to know going into this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally feel that. So are you kind of saying that like your grandmother joined Mormonism as like a form of like rehab to try to like sober up, or?
I don't exactly know if that's the case. I just know that it certainly helped her sober up. I don't know if that was the reason for it. I think if we're to be totally honest, I'm, nearly positive that she was also a closet lesbian, and that was something that she could have, just another mask to hide behind. This is a totally tangential, real interesting lady. Married 5 times, twice to the same man, my biological grandfather, and divorced him twice.
I've heard about that happening. I've heard about that happening before.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there that just is not uncovered and probably won't be until well after she's dead.
Oh, and honestly, because I've seen that a lot of people, instead of doing something that maybe requires a little more work, such as going to AA or just coming to terms with their own issues, they'll just join a fucking religion that's super restrictive, because then you don't have to think, you don't have to work, you just have to follow.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's why people join cults. So
yeah.
I have so many friends who were real into straight edge scenes, and it's because they just kind of needed to have rules in their life. They said, okay, well, we're vegan now. Okay, that's cool, man. Like, I'm all for that. But like, okay, we don't drink caffeine now. It's like, really? Like, okay, now we don't drink, we don't fucking smoke. Like, it's just the more rules that some of these people don't have, like fucking sex because they just want to have more rules in place, and maybe that's what they need. It's not for me though, that's for sure.
And where I'm like, bro, I'm going to the head shop and the coffee shop later.
Sure. And then the porn store.
Yeah, there you go. That's so funny. I mean, like, it's also the same concept of why a lot of people join the military. For some people, it's a lot easier to go through life without having to make your own decisions. And that's now, I'm not saying that's why everybody joins the military. You know, there's a litany of reasons why, and I'm sure Matt can attest to that.
Some of us say, fuck our home life. I'm moving across the country and they'll pay me to do it.
Exactly. So perfect example of why, you know, that's not why everybody does it. But, you know, it's kind of the same concept of why, like, people send their kids to military school. You know what I mean? Like, you know, do as I say, not as I do, take orders and do what you're supposed to do. So, I mean, I get it. In a way, it does make things easier, but it makes things easier for a lot of people because you're not thinking for yourself. Thinking for yourself and making the hard choices is what makes life hard.
Yeah.
Right?
They're rewarding.
Exactly, you know, and then some days it's not so rewarding and you eat a whole bunch of chocolate and it's fine. So Chris, are there any helpful hints or tips or anything that, like, you've learned through your journey? You know, like you spoke about, you know, like the meditation and like the music. Is there, you know, a specific thing, like, you know, when you get really upset, you know, you go and meditate for 15 minutes, you know what I mean? Like, is there anything specific that, like, really, really helps you out that you would like to share?
The Zazen, I would say, is number one, especially like in the height of the pandemic. I work in retail, like that's my day job. And, you know, we were surrounded by 500 people a day. And, you know, these people were just fucking screaming at you because they did not want to mask up or whatever. And it's at the end of the day, it's like I could feel my blood pressure just completely spiked. And if it were not for, you know, being able to find those calm, quiet moments, I probably wouldn't have. It would have panned out certainly different.
Yeah.
That being said, like having time to work on creative elements, like you know, whether it be music or even if it's just a matter of picking up my guitar. Like some days I won't even have anything, you know, that I want to play or write or anything, but I just the idea that I picked it up that day and, you know, could strum something just makes me feel better. I think just surrounding yourself with things that you love, whether or not you are inspired by them at the time, is important.
Yeah, just, you know, like there's this person that I follow on, I'm not going to say their name, but there's this person that I follow on Facebook, and they made this thing about Nike about how it's like, just do it. And they were talking about how they feel like they should film normal people and have it be like, just do it scared, just do it tired, just do it exasperated. Cause, you know, there are plenty of times where I'm sitting there staring at my guitar and I'm like, man, I don't even want to pick it up. I got tiny hands. I can't get from the G to the D chord. Like, what the heck? You know what I mean? Getting super, super frustrated.
Like,
But
no, from G to D sucks. So
Yeah,
totally
it does.
justified it.
I know.
I did it for about a year and I was terrible at it. I did the world a favor by admitting that truth and just sticking to really bad hardcore vocals.
Yeah, man, I've been trying so hard. It's rough. It's rough. I'm trying to do, what is it? G, C, D, E, and A right now. And my brain hurts. My brain hurts, especially with A and E. I'm sure everyone who's watching, not everyone, but a lot of people have no idea what I'm talking about. But it's basically where you have to take three fingers and move them in a very, very small space to different strings. Yeah, it's so hard. And I also have tiny hands, so trying to get them like over the frets and stuff. It's my stubby little sausage fingers, but I do agree, though, that when I do finally pick it up, even with the frustration, I feel better afterwards. So I definitely agree with you, Chris, that finding external outlets, you know, for like you know, Matt, it's like, you know, you're sewing patches, you know, you're getting your space down in the basement done, you know what I mean? Listening to music, doing your reviews, gives you a little break from the chaos in your head, you know? And I think that's really important for people. Well, I mean, at least it's important for me to tell my brain gremlin to shut the fuck up every once in a while.
Exactly.
Well, Matt, do you have any other questions for Chris? Because I did all mine.
No, I did. I think you handled all the questions we had for this. And thanks, Chris. This has been awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for being on. You are our first guest.
Woo, number one.
Yes, you are number one.
And we've got Chris in a Bad Time Records shirt. I'm repping some Kill Lincoln. So
oh man, I gotta get a shirt. I gotta get a Dissidente shirt. I gotta find one in my size and buy it. Gotta bet. But anyways, so just for those of you who are tuning in, we're gonna try to have this up by this weekend, which I'm looking at my calendar right now, is sometime between the 17th and the 20th. We should have another episode coming up, hopefully by the end of this month. Like we've said before, life has been kind of crazy for Matt and I lately, so trying to find the time to sit down and film.
We intend to do between 4 and 2 episodes a month, and as usual, it will show on Friday or Saturday, depending on if I do it right when I post it for the scheduling. But I will also be promoting the shit out of this as every episode, so everyone will know when its premiere is.
Yes, we're hoping to get some more guest stars to come on to the show. Our next episode, we're going to go back to the normal format, and we're going to teach a new skill called the dime game. And it's going to help you figure out how to handle stressful situations and how to address them. So it'll be fun and informative.
For the dime game, I'm going to do one real life and one informative to show where you can tell the situation to fuck off and where you can't.
Exactly. We're going to give you guys a well-rounded way of how to use the skill. But on that note, we're going to go ahead and say thank you again to Chris for coming in for our episode today. It's been super, super fun. And I want to remind everybody out there to be safe and to be nice to each other. And please try to make good choices.
And once again, we are Psych Revolution. And remember to weaponize your trauma.
And your mental health. Peace out, guys.